It's about to go down with Marc and Cathey, a live coaching show about dropping ideas. Marc and Cathey coach and have conversations with brilliant idea creators who are reimagining the world through the expression of their words, thoughts, and action.
Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of It's About to Go Down. I am Marc Williams.
And I'm Cathey Armillas. I have Dr. Gary Sanchez with us today. And, you know, I met Gary, Marc, at an NSA conference, National Speakers Association. For anybody listening, it's the NSA that speaks, not listens, right? So we were talking about speaking, and Gary has this great system called the YOS. And the YOS is helping people figure out their why, but not only figuring out their why, because a lot of people out there talk about like, find your why. In fact, Gary, tells us, it's pretty frustrating when somebody's like, find your why, but you don't know how. But he takes it a level deeper in his system. So he teaches us, our why, and then what we do with our why, like how, and then our what. And so I love that. Gary, welcome to our show. I love that our goal on this show is to try to take your big system and get it down to that marketing campaign, that title of your TED Talk, that big idea. So Gary, welcome.
Thank you, Cathey, and thank you, Marc. Yeah, I'm excited for this. This is something that I've been trying to do myself and haven't really been, when you're too close to something. And that's why I'm so glad that we're going to get to work on this, because it's a massive thing that we've got to get down to, like, what's the title? Yep. And I'm excited for it. So hit me. Take us where we're supposed to go.
Well, first, Gary, tell us about the system. Let's give a little context about the system. Yeah.
So for those of you that are listening, I took this concept of why, right? Forever man has been asking the question, why? Why am I here? Why do I do what I do? Yeah, exactly. I showed a little video of this guy screaming about why, because he didn't know his why. Hearing that you need to discover your why, hearing that you need to know your why. Yeah, that's valuable. And we've all heard it. But what are you going to do with that if you don't know your why? How useful is it to talk about why if you don't know yours? And that was pretty much my story. I'd seen Simon Sinek's TED Talk 20 times. I'd read his book many times. This is about 14 years ago. And I was like, that's a great thing, man. I know what I do, but I don't know why I do it. And so I went on this quest to figure out my why. I actually called Simon, and he and I worked together for about 8 months trying to figure out my why. He didn't really have a process for it. But I got close, and I kept working with it, and finally figured out my why, which is to find a better way and share it. That's how my brain works. I'm always in search of a better way. I've got a lot of patents and products and inventions that are all better ways of doing things. So I went back and figured out a better way to do it than what he was doing. And instead of taking 6 or 8 or 10 months, I could help somebody in about an hour. And I did it for thousands of people for free. And in doing that, I noticed patterns and trends and similarities, and figured out there's only 9 different whys. That was the most important thing I discovered. There's 9 different whys, and all of us have all of them, but one of them is more dominant, and that's the one that becomes your why. Mm-hmm. And then later on figured out that not only is one your why, but one of them is also your how you do what you do. And one of them is what you bring, your what. So in figuring out the 9 whys, I also figured out how to discover your why, your how, your what, and create your message for you. And so, Marc, both you and Cathey have been through this. Mm-hmm. Maybe give a little bit of your feedback on how that went for you.
Oh, man, it was on point. First of all, I got to tell you, as Cathey has said, we've all gone through so many different assessments to see who we are, what we are, why we are, how we are. What I liked is the questions were straight and to the point, easy to grasp, and easy to receive and easy to answer. What surprised me so on such a great level was when I read everything, I thought this was on point. And to what you said earlier, to be able to help somebody out to do that in such a short amount of time. You just said it. It took you, did you say 8 months to figure out your why?
Yeah.
Right? And it's an ongoing thing for us all to figure out our why. So to be able to create something that helps us to do it so quickly. And again, to read it and say, wow, that's right. But I got to tell you, what's next level is then having a conversation with you as you explain all of these different whys and the whole concept that there's a more dominant why. And it's not that those other whys don't matter. They're just not as dominant. That was very mind-boggling for me. And we'll probably get into this later, but I got to bring it up now because you said it and it really resonated with me. The fact that not only once I know my YOS, but when others know my YOS, it helps us, one, to communicate in a much more effective and productive way. And it even helps us to figure out how we can, I don't want to say use, but for lack of a better term, use each other to our strengths, because we find out about each other on a whole nother, or maybe even 9 levels deeper.
Yeah.
Can I, for the audience's sake, let me tell them your Marc and Cathey's YOS. I think it might be valuable because they know you, and now they'll really know you. So for Marc's why is to contribute to a greater cause, add value, have an impact in people's lives. He uses his time, his money, his energy, his connections to push other people forward. How he does that is by seeking depth, breadth, and details. He loves to dive in deep and look for the little things, the nuances that make a big difference. And ultimately, what he brings are better ways to help people move forward, things that are going to push them forward even faster. How does that feel to you?
That's one point.
Dead on. And had you given me, Gary, had you given me $1 million and said, can you explain Marc's why? And as much as I know Marc, I would not have been able to do it. And yet I can put 100% on everything you said.
So what it does is it gives you the words to clearly articulate the feeling of what you think it is, right? So now that we know, now when we look at Marc, so all of you that are watching, when you look at Marc, you would have had no idea. You see a handsome guy with glasses and a plaid shirt with a wooden background. But now what it does is strips away what we think we see and brings forward what is actually there. He wants to help. He wants to know the details, and he wants to help you find a better way.
Yeah.
Right. And so if we jump over to Cathey now. So Cathey's why is to challenge the status quo, to think differently, to push the limit, to not do it like everybody else does, to who says there's rules, who says there's even a box. Let's just think big, right? How she does that is by finding better ways. She's always cataloging, looking for better ways to do things. And then ultimately what she brings is a trusting relationship where you can count on her, where she's going to reach out her hand and walk you through whatever you're trying to get through, which is essentially what this show is, right? The first thing she says is, well, this is not a podcast. We're not going to call this a podcast. No. And we're not going to have any structure to this like you've seen before. We're going to do this differently.
Yeah,
I'm like,
that's so true.
And so, Marc, how does that feel? Well, first of all, Cathey, how does that feel to you?
No, it's like, it's again, dead on. I don't think I could have described myself, which is wild. I don't think I could have described it, but when you said it, I was like 100%. That is me to a T. It really is.
Frees you up to be you authentically. And it gives you the confidence to articulate what we get. Why would I choose Cathey? Now, you know, if you want to think different, if you want something better, and you want someone you can trust to be there for you, that's Cathey.
I have to tell you, Gary, on that note, Marc, I'm sure you've seen this before because we have a lot of clients. And have you ever looked at your client profile and said, oh, I understand why certain companies have chose to work with me and certain companies maybe haven't? Because if there's a company that's pretty conventional and they stick to the way that they've always done things, and they're a 200-year-old company, I'm probably not their person. And I knew that already, but now you gave me the reason why. I was like, oh, that makes sense. I lead with outside of the box. And Mark, I think the same, right? If there's a company or organization that does not want to lead with, contributing, or they don't have that same value that's a big why for you, it just won't mesh no matter how hard you try.
So if I haven't shared this with either of you before yet, but if you were to write this sentence down, that is, I'm looking for someone who's looking for, and then you put your why there and your how there and your what there. So I'll do it for you, Cathey. So if I were you, I would say, or for your audience, Cathey is looking for someone who's looking to think different, to challenge the status quo, right? I'm looking for someone who's looking for a better way. And I'm looking for someone who's looking for someone they can trust to be there for them.
Wow.
And that's your ideal client.
Yeah. Wow.
And if you have that, and the same thing with you, Mark, right? You're looking for someone who's looking for a way to have a bigger impact. I'm looking for someone who's looking for more depth and meaning and details. And I'm looking for someone who's looking for a better way. And if you find that, they don't have to have your same YOS. They just have to believe what you believe.
Yep.
And if they're looking for that, you are the perfect fit, and it is going to be awesome. If they don't believe that, you could work with them, but it's just not going to feel that good.
Yeah. That's what I was saying, Mark. You know how sometimes you find it over your career, you just find, and it's like you just naturally, it was almost like it was blind. Because in my mind, I'm like, who doesn't want to work with Marc Williams? Like, but I get it now.
Yes, I get it. It's funny, Cathey, just the same way as you said, if somebody wants to stick to their traditional ways, Cathey might be way too much for them, right?
Yeah, totally.
If somebody does not want to go in depth and go to that detailed, Mark, you're trying to pull way too much out of me.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Don't go that far.
So your messaging on your website needs to reflect what we just talked about. Because the better able you are to articulate what it is you believe, the more you will attract those people that believe what you believe. And those are your ideal clients.
Yeah.
So if you don't say it, what are the odds that anyone's going to get it?
Right.
Because you couldn't even get it for each other.
Yeah.
Right. Right. And you know each other really well.
Yep.
But if I don't know that about you, Cathey, and I'm just looking at you, odds are I'm not going to get that. And how long is that going to take, do you think? How many conversations, how much time are we going to have to spend together before I kind of understand that about you?
Yeah. You probably have to get into my system. You probably have to really, yeah, I get that.
So that's my challenge, is like, how do we distill this down to the sentence? I have an idea of kind of where I'm at now with it that I could share, or maybe not share.
No, please share. I would love to. I
share.
already have some ideas running through my head.
What the YOS does for people is it helps them have better connections faster. Connect with themselves better, connect with their families better, connect with each other, with their coworkers, significant other, connect with the marketplace, connect with their ideal client, like you just saw. Better connections faster. Can I tell you a story?
Yeah, please.
I was meeting with this group that does a lot of work with Gen Zs. And they do a lot with Pitbull and some other celebrities to kind of work with the Gen Zs that are struggling. And I was meeting with them in Scottsdale I had just happened to be there and they were coming into town. And so we were meeting at this breakfast place called I think it was called the Breakfast Club. And anyways, it was raining that day, which is rare in Scottsdale. And so they were running a little bit late. So I got there and I was just sitting in a little coffee area and these two girls sat down at a table next to me. And so I said, hey, what generation are you guys? And they said, well, we're Gen Zs. And I said, oh, I said, what are the struggles that Gen Zs are having? And they said, well, it's with mental health. I said, well, what do you mean mental health? What is mental health? And they said, well, we spend so much time on our phones comparing ourselves to others that it doesn't allow us to know who we are and live our own lives. And it's just it brings us down. It makes us doubt ourselves. And I said, okay, well, how do you figure out what to do with your life? And the two girls said, well, we just kind of do what feels good, what feels right. I said, well, how's that working out for you? They said, not very well. And I said, okay, well, I told them I'm meeting these three people. And the one gal was thin African-American gal with kind of a furry hat on. And the other one was kind of a heavier Hispanic gal, kind of that looked a little bit shy and reserved. And so I said, look, I'm meeting with these people to talk about this exact thing. I said, and I told them about the YOS. And I said, while you're having breakfast, discover your YOS and then come talk to us. Mm-hmm. They said, okay. And so the three that I were meeting came, and the three people that I was meeting with, one was an African-American guy from England, who's the business guy. The other was this tall, white, muscly, bald guy with tattoos all over him, real intimidating looking kind of guy, bodybuilder looking guy. And his wife is also a bodybuilder, kind of platinum hair, super fit, strong, really strong, kind of big people. And so while we're having breakfast, I looked over and I looked at my phone and I saw that the one gal, the kind of heavier, shyer gal, had discovered her YOS and the other one hadn't. So I walked over to him and I said, hey, I see that you discovered your YOS and were you having trouble? And she goes, yeah, I think I gave you the wrong email. And so sure enough, she had. But the other gal, her Y came up the same as you, Cathey, which was challenge. Mm-hmm. And so I said, how did that feel to you? And she said, right on point. And I said, people with the Y of challenge don't like to follow the rules, don't draw inside the lines. They like to push the limits. But if you looked at her, you could tell that's not what she was doing in that moment. So I said, do you feel like you're hiding right now? And she said, yeah. And her eyes started to get real teary-eyed. I said, do you kind of feel like you don't fit? And she said, yeah, that's exactly how I feel. And I said, you see that big, bald, white guy over there with the tattoos all over him? And she said, yeah. And I said, he has your same Y. Could I go grab him and have him come talk to you? And she said, yeah. So I went over to him and I said, hey, would you mind talking to her? Because she has your same Y. And I think you would have a great conversation. So I walked him over there, introduced him, and they sat and talked for like 10 minutes. He comes back to the table and he's crying and she's crying. And he said, that was the most incredible conversation I've ever had. He said, I was her. I know exactly what she's going through. And you might have gone through something like this as well, Cathey, at a time in your life when you were younger and just felt lost. And so it's very common with the Y of challenge. Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
And
how would you know?
He said, I said, how long would it have taken you to have a conversation like, he said, that's me. And I know I can help her. And I said, how long would it have taken you to have that conversation? And he said, months, if ever.
Yeah.
And so it helps you have better connections faster. Does that make sense?
That totally makes sense.
And even our conversations that we've had, right, since we got on this, what we can have now in terms of conversations is so different than what we could have had without knowing it.
Gary, can you share your three really quick, just so for the basis of the rest of this conversation?
My why is to find a better way and share it. How I do that is by making things clear, first for myself and then for others. And then ultimately what I bring are simple solutions to help others move forward. So it's better way, clarify, simplify. If it's not better, clear, and simple, I don't want it. If it is better, clear, and simple, I do want it. So when you went through the whole process, right? That's why at the end it's very simplified, because it's got to be better, clear, and simple.
Yeah.
We can go a lot deeper after the fact. So, Mark, there's so much more detail behind what you saw on the dashboard. But I tried to make it simple so that everybody could use it.
Got it. And of course, I want to go deeper. I want to get all the details.
Yeah.
So I didn't mean to do all the talking there, but I thought maybe that would help us, understand kind of what I see on a daily basis. I see that. I mean, I could tell you story after story after story like that with every different. I really don't ever want to have a conversation with someone unless I know their YOS. What are we going to talk about? Where are we going to go with this? Hey, how are your kids? Hey, what are you into? Do you like the spoil? You like the Cowboys, or, whatever.
Yeah.
But when you know somebody's YOS, it just allows you to have a better connection so much faster.
Hey, Gary, you made me curious about, especially because you're talking about connections. Who is somebody who did not know your why, your how, and your what?
Me.
Besides you?
In my life, you mean?
Yes.
I don't think anybody did. I don't think I had, when I was in high school and it came time to figure out, where do you want to go to college? What do you want to major in? What do you want to do with the rest of your life? I had no idea. Not a clue where to go, how to pick a school. I ended up going to University of Colorado in Boulder because some of my friends went there and I had a good time when I visited, right? And then when I got there, what's your major? Well, I'm undeclared. I was undeclared till the last possible second. Almost had an emotional breakdown when I had to decide, or a mental breakdown. I went to the career counselors to figure out, what am I gonna major in? What does this mean if I pick something? And I ended up just picking biology because I had a good grade in it. And that lasts for about 6 months. And then you got to figure out, okay, what are you going to do with this biology degree? I don't know. What am I supposed to do with it? And that's when I ended up picking dentistry, because I knew a little bit about it because my dad was a dentist, but it wasn't my lifelong dream. And then when I got into dentistry, I enjoyed it. Was it what I should have ever done with my life? I don't know. Now that I see what's come out of it, most likely I could say yes, but that wasn't my passion. It wasn't the lifestyle I really wanted. But once you're in it, committed to it, invested in it, and then you start accumulating things, houses, cars, spouses, well, one spouse, but kids.
Yeah.
You can't stop. Very easily, at least. So I think there's a lot of people that have gone through something similar. Most people.
Yeah, I would agree.
And it's, I didn't know my why. I didn't know my how. I didn't even know how to make a decision on all that stuff. So I lived life by default.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Until you can't take it anymore. So actually what happened, and I don't know, actually what happened was I was at an event. After I figured all this out, I was living both lives, dentistry and had the Y Institute. And I was at this event where I took a it was called Zozobra in Santa Fe. It's kind of like a Burning Man type thing, but not so much of the whole drug thing. It's more of a burning this giant, not statue, but a big, kind of like a statue. But of course, you eat and drink too much. And I woke up with a headache, took a couple Advil, went back to bed. One of those Advil didn't dissolve, and it lodged into my GI tract and burnt a hole right where there was an artery. And I started to bleed internally, and I didn't know it. And so finally I started throwing up blood, and blood was coming out everywhere. And I ended up going to the ER, and they made me wait so long on the ER that by the time they finally admitted me, my blood pressure was 60/30, and I'd lost half my blood. So blood in your GI tract acts like a laxative. So you have to go to the restroom all the time. So I got up to go to the restroom, and I wasn't in a private room because it was a very busy weekend. And so I locked the door behind me. As soon as I locked the door, I passed out and hit my head on the sink and ended up waking up, I don't know how much later, in a big pool of blood. And so I pushed the door open, and then I passed out again. And the next thing I know, I end up waking up in a bed with all my clothes off and the 2 paddles on me and all that stuff. And then they rushed me to surgery to try to get to the bleed. They couldn't get to it. So they just waited. And then they did a CAT scan to see if I'd stopped bleeding. They pump all the dye in you. Well, then they're pumping the dye in there. They blew out my arm, and my arm starts filling up with blood clots that are growing into my lungs. So the doctor walks in and says, hey, we've got to treat the blood clots because they're growing into your lungs. If we don't treat the blood clots, you're going to die. And they said, but if we treat the blood clots, we can't get to the bleed. So you're going to die. And I said, well, what are we going to do? And they said, we don't know. And that was not the answer I was looking for. And luckily in that moment, my phone rang. And it's a guy that I play golf with all the time. That's a cardiologist there at the hospital. And I said, hey, I was looking through the names, Gary, and I saw your name, and I don't like what they're going to do. He said, I'm going to take over. And so he monitored everything. And essentially what happened was 9 days later, I finally they put an IV of heparin in, and I had to go to bed that evening with an IV of heparin in and hope that I didn't bleed, which I didn't, obviously, because I'm here. But it's a pretty crazy time.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff happens in the ICU. When I got out, one of my patients that was in his 80s said to me, hey, Gary, you got a second chance on life. And he said, when you get to 80 and you look back on your life, are you going to be glad that you stayed a dentist? Or are you going to wish you'd taken the YOS to the world? And I said, I'm going to wish I'd taken the YOS to the world. And that's when I knew I had to sell my practice. And so what does a dentist know about taking the YOS to the world? Not a lot. Not a lot. A lot of mistakes along this journey, but a lot of great stuff along the journey. So we were way down the journey now, but this is where the message of simplifying it down to, and the reason I'm telling you so much is so that you kind of see more of a whole picture, and you can help me. I can see Cathey's mind going crazy over there.
Yeah.
You can just
you both know
zero
me.
in on.
Yeah, you can see my face when there's things turning in my head.
Yes.
Sit back, Gary. Wait for it. Sit back, Gary. Wait for it.
I just have some thoughts because so here's a thought that I like. First of all, Gary, what a great story. Like a horrible story, but great at the same time, and then it made me think that your why found you. It was like, find your why before it finds you somehow. And so that was kind of one of the thoughts that I had. And it's not always this dreadful, like, oh my gosh, your why is going to find you and kill you kind of thing. But it's like, sometimes it could take somebody their entire life. I think most of us have had those same experiences that you described, where you might go into a school and be like, I don't know, what should I be doing? Or like, where you're or you're following a default path depending on what's in your immediate environment. So if you had a father that was a dentist, guess what you became? A dentist. Like, if you were in a family that nobody went to college, guess what happened? You didn't go to college. So you're following the de facto default. But I'm wondering too, because to me, the better connections faster seems like a second level thing. I'm looking for that first level.
Yeah.
And Marc, I think it's something I don't have it yet, but my brain is still toiling. But I think there's something in, finding your why is harder than you think. Finding your why is, you have to kind of uncover it. Finding your why should be your first step in life. Finding your why becomes before everything. Finding your why is the most important thing you can do in life. I don't know. These are some of the things that were toiling through my head. Right. But I think that if I'm thinking about like either a campaign or, Gary doing a TED talk, we got to get to the heart. We got to get right to the single person. We're not trying to show how it engages with other people yet. We want to get to each and every person first, I think, and why it's so critical.
Well, I will tell you one thing that you said earlier, Gary, that to Cathey's point really stood out to me. You said I lived my life by default.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is, call it an unfortunate universal connection.
Yeah.
How many people are doing that, right? How many people have spent years upon years of their life living by default, doing what dad did, or taking on the same career that mom did, or following the same thing because that's what your guidance counselor in high school said you should do. And when you said earlier, I was undeclared until the last possible second. That phrase really stood out because I think, to Cathey's point, of those three words, better connections, faster, there's something about the word faster, and that seems to be an ongoing theme that really stands out to me. And that's why, Cathey, when you asked the question, find your why before it finds you, also stood out to me, because it really emphasizes the time that that quite often is lost, because it's not that we haven't figured out our why, it's that we haven't figured out how to find our why.
Right.
To do it quicker.
Yep.
Yep.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
One other thing I can add to this, I had a friend who, when we graduated high school, he didn't go to college and he just started partying. And he did all the crazy stuff that we do in our 20s until he hit rock bottom. And then he found a mentor and started on personal growth and got into real estate. Now he's one of the wealthiest guys in New Mexico because his runway was from age 23, let's say, to 60 now. So he's had, say, 40 years of runway to do what he was meant to do. Most of us wait until we're 30, 40, 50, or never to make the switch, and our runway is so much shorter.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? The sooner you can fall, the sooner you can succeed.
Yeah. You almost have to hit your why rock bottom, kind of.
Yes.
Oh,
Like,
that's an interesting.
it's like,
I mean,
I'm doing what?
It is, though, right? It's kind of, on that note, I mean, I meant it to be funny, but, one of the things that we should be doing in this moment right now, the three of us, is we should be considering the language and the verbiage and hitting somebody in a way that they haven't heard this concept before. We've heard find your why. We've heard, start with why. We've heard your why is the most important thing. What are the things we haven't heard? What are concepts that we can run parallel to it that will evoke a certain emotion or a certain importance that we can tie to the importance of why?
I wrote down what you said last time when we talked way back when.
Oh yeah.
And
what did I say?
You said, why can't we figure out our why?
Oh, I do remember saying that. Yeah. Yep. Why can't we figure it out? Yeah. See, that's a good.
Or the how to. The other one you said was I'll give you you said three that I wrote down. Why can't we figure out our why? The other one was the how to the why.
Yep.
And the other was, why do so many people not know their why?
Yeah. I played a lot on the words. Yeah. Yeah, Mark, which one, do any of those resonate with you?
They're all three good, and the how to the why sounds like a catchy title. I think the first one resonates with me the most, though. Why can't we figure out our why? Because for me, it's twofold. It's not only that I can't figure out my why, but sometimes I figure out the wrong why. And that was actually a question I had written a little bit earlier, Gary, that I wanted to get your thoughts on. How many people get their why wrong? Right. And then that goes back to Cathey, you know, I love your brain. Even when you said the why rock bottom, I was like, wow, that's an interesting thing, because, you know, sometimes we're following the wrong path because we think we figured it out.
Yeah.
How about this? What if my why isn't my why?
Yeah, I like that. I like that.
Here's what I typically get.
That's a good.
If I tell somebody, you know, when you know your why, what you do has more impact. They'll say, oh, yeah. I know what you mean. And in fact, I agree with you. And I know my why. And I'll say, great. Well, what's your why? And they'll pull out their phone and they'll show me pictures of their kids. Oh, this is my why. My kids are my why. Or, hey, I wrote a new book, or I'm starting a new business, and that's my why. And what they're talking about is short-term motivation for doing things the way they do it. And when their kids grow up or their business moves on, then they don't have a why. And so what if my why really isn't my why?
I like that. See, I really like that.
I like that too.
Because it took the original one that I said, but then it took what you just said, Mark, which was really good. What if your why isn't your why? Like how do you know if it's right? And I like that because the second layer to that question immediately makes you go, oh, well, first of all, how do I really know what my why is? That would be the first thing I'd be asking myself if I heard that question. And then second, oh yeah, crap. Funny enough, I think we all know this. I think all three of us probably know this in all the work that we do. But negativity causes us to react more than we will do more to avoid pain than we will to go after gain. That's how humans are wired. And so negative questions, I like negative questions sometimes because what it does is you create the answer to it, Gary, right? You're like, great, I have a solution. like it's not like you're leaving it in the negative. It's like you ask this question that has a negative framing to it that is already making me question myself. Ooh, what if I don't know my why? And ooh, what are the consequences if I'm wrong about that? You're already making me think that in that question. So I really like that a lot.
Yeah.
That's what I tackled on too. And it was that second part that you just said. What are the consequences if I didn't figure it out?
Yeah.
And the odds are I probably didn't.
Yeah. And the odds are I probably didn't get it right. Definitely. And I could see you starting a talk this way, Gary, right? I mean, it would be a great way if that was your title. I could see you starting in some of the areas that you said here. Like many people think that they might know what their why is, and that might be something that they absolutely love or cherish, but really it's not down to the heart of what makes them who they are or what makes them tick or what really motivates them. And yeah, you just tackle it immediately. You're like, most people just don't know it. For the people that do know it, but here's the thing, it can be easy. And like, yeah, I see it as setting up a problem to give a solution.
And you've already got me wondering, of all of the people on the planet, whether they're the people we admire, the people we know, the people we don't know, there's got to be 1,000,001 examples of people who thought they knew their why, only to discover they didn't really know until much later on.
Yep.
And to be able to go deep like I like to do, go detail like I like to do, I would be fascinated to hear all of these different examples of people who I thought they had it all figured out. And even they didn't have it figured out.
Yeah.
And now, as you set that up to then get to, and I agree with you, Cathey, that next level, which is now, one, how do I figure it out? And how do I figure it out quicker so I don't continue to lose all of this time that might have been wasted?
And that's his level too, right? And that's where, that's the entry, that's the front door to entering into Gary's world. And that's all you ever want. You know, you made me think, I have to say this really quick, because I think this is an interesting concept, Mark. I was thinking about somebody like Michael Jordan. A lot of people would probably say, oh, Michael Jordan, one of the greatest basketball players to ever live. Like, basketball must have been his why, right? And you're like, no. Probably if you talk to Michael Jordan today, he might be like, it's just one of the things I did. It was how I expressed something, not the why though, right? And I think that people falsely, like you made me think about it when you're saying like all these people that might, you know, you might look at them and think, oh, they got their why figured out. But do they?
Mm-hmm.
And how many people suffer from secondary career choices, right? How many people enter a career choice later on in life because of that? And that might be some of the interesting information that you could bring around a small talk, like a legacy type talk, Gary, like something like a TED talk, is you bring in some of those pieces, because I think they're really important.
That's the most common, right?
Yeah, I'm sure.
You stay with it until your kids are off on their own. And then all of a sudden you're like, now really, is this all there is to it? Is this what's left?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you're like, this was not what I thought it was going to be. And like, what do I really want now? But you've only got 10, 15, 20, whatever the number of years is left.
Yeah. Your runway is getting shorter.
Your runway's shorter. And that's the power of knowing your YOS early. So this is the statement that usually I can see the audience nodding quite a bit when I say this. And I'll say, would it be valuable for a teenage girl to know that she has a gift and what it is before she starts to date? Before she picks a career, right? Before she picks her spouse? Or would it be valuable for a high school boy to know his YOS and that he has a gift before he embarks on his career? You know, how much time is wasted? How many bad decisions are made because they don't know?
Oh my gosh, I love that, Gary. Like a lot.
Yeah.
Especially when you said the dating one.
Yes, I know.
I think that hits home with a lot of people because
moms.
Yeah. Well, and especially when you're in your younger years, everybody's kind of in the same pot, if you will, right? We're all just kind of there. And I think that a lot of people don't think about the compatibility, like what your compatibility partner looks like for a long time. It's really easy on the short term.
YOS for dating would be fascinating.
It would be.
Because I've seen what works well and I've seen what doesn't work well.
Yeah.
And it's very predictable.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about that. Like what doesn't work well?
Well, if you put somebody with the Y of right way, which is structure, process, systems, with somebody with your Y. Disaster. I can already tell you. Yeah, they may have a lot of fun. And at first, that person would love it about you. Oh my gosh, she's so on the spur of the moment. We have so much fun together, and who knows what we're going to do, but we do something fun. Well, once you get married, that becomes, why can't you balance the damn checkbook? Or why can't you even follow a recipe? Or, and all the stuff, which then weighs onto you. Yeah. And you're like, well, what is wrong with me? Something must be wrong with me. Why can everybody else keep their house perfect and I can't even do it. All that stuff.
Yeah.
So there are certain ones that go really well together. Put you with somebody that has Marc's why, and they want to contribute to you. They want to help you. They want to be part of it. They want to be part of the fun.
Yeah.
Oh, you're like, hey, this is great. We both love it. But if you don't find that because you find your opposite or whatever, it's just, I don't know. It's pretty tough. It's a tough sell. It's an easy sell up front, but a tough sell long term.
I get that, which is probably, Marc, why we've sustained such a long friendship and such a connected friendship. Like this kind of organically happened, Gary. Like I just called him one day and said, hey, I'm thinking about doing something cool. I want to tell you about it. Like I have this idea. And Marc always explains it as I just heard, I have an idea, I'm in. Like he didn't even hear the idea yet. And so it makes sense. And we've had, we realize we've been friends, really good friends for over 10 years. So it's been kind of that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
It makes sense.
I like that.
Wow. You just talked about the YOS of dating. And I think about how many people have been in relationships for way too long.
Yeah, no kidding too, right? Like,
right. And part of it is because they haven't gotten to that point where they're now making collaborative decisions, right? Where now your why really affects how you're making decisions.
Yeah.
And it's like, I knew there was something I didn't like about you.
Yeah, but I couldn't put a finger on it before. I couldn't pinpoint it. Like, yeah.
So here's what the YOS does. We talked about it earlier. I think it was I don't know if it was before we started recording or not, but essentially what it does is it demystifies things that seem so mysterious.
Mm-hmm.
Like, who am I really talking to here? Like why are they wearing that? Or like, why are they doing that? Why are they making those decisions? And why are they passionate about that? Or why am I not passionate? Why am I that way? And you don't know. Why don't other people just do things the way I think they should be done? And then all of a sudden, when you know, then you know, and you're like, oh my God, you get to laugh about it. You get to enjoy it. You get to appreciate it versus get pissed off about it.
Yeah.
So if I didn't know that about you, Cathey, that you're not going to follow the rules, you're not going to do it the way everyone else is going to do it, it could irritate me to death, right?
Yeah.
But if I do know it, now I get to appreciate you for it. Say, oh my gosh, you just wait till you meet her. She has got big ideas and great thoughts, and she's going to push you and push the limits, and she's going to see things you never even saw before.
Yeah.
Oh, well, great. I can't wait to meet her.
Yeah. And that's
Does that make sense?
Get. Yeah. And that's what you'll get, right?
Yes.
And I could see that about Marc. When I have talked really well, like I've pitched Marc to some of my clients, and he's done some work with some of my clients, and I'll be like, oh, Marc, I mean, where do I start? And I can have all these details, but like Marc really just wants to contribute to the greater good. Like that's a great way to describe who he is.
Yep.
I love that. Yeah. And it shortcuts it.
What I do now when I introduce people is in the email, I'll put their YOS. So I'll say, this is, hey, Cathey, let me introduce you to Marc Williams. And I'll put a little in there about you. And then I'll say his why is that, I'll have contribute, mastery, better way. And then I'll have
challenge,
Cathey's,
trust, better way.
Yeah.
Or challenge, better way, trust. Yeah.
Challenge, better way, trust. So now going in, I already know who I'm talking to.
Yeah.
That's powerful. Yeah. That's powerful. You know how many hiring decisions you could save?
Yeah. That's that's why the YOS for dating, the YOS for job searching and job and hiring, the YOS for business partnership. Same with business partnerships, right? Like, my brother-in-law is engaged in a business right now that they started, and it's like 3 partners, right? And each one, they know their exact role. This person's the people person. He's the guy going out there networking with all the investors. this person's the brains behind it. Like this person is going to, and the other person's the ideas person. The other person's trying to like break everything down. And so I can see what you're saying, Gary, in that particular situation. They figured that out fast. But how many people are both ideas people and they're like, oh, we'd be great. Let's have a company. Nobody knows how to do the technical stuff. Like that's a terrible business partnership from a standpoint of being able to get things done, you know.
Lots of brainstorming going on there.
Lots of crazy ideas coming out. Yeah.
Hey, you want to brainstorm today? That's what we do. We brainstorm.
That's what we do. We brainstorm. So, you know, some of the things I'm really loving for the ideas are these alliterations of the whys. I really like it. Why is your why so important? Why, you know, some of the things, I wrote down another one too. Why is your what? Wait, sorry. There's so many of these. Why is your what? No, it's God, sorry. God, I wrote this 3 different ways. What in your why? Why is your what and your how, or something like that. I don't know. I wrote it really weird because I wrote 2 things and I intertwined them, but it's basically like getting all 3 too. I kind of like to, you know, and why is your why so important? I feel like why you might not know your why, or what's the one that you said, Gary?
What if my why isn't my why?
What if my why isn't my why? I like some of these alliterations, and I think kind of messing around with them, I think is really good. And in fact, Gary, I would really suggest, one of the things that my knee jerk on this is that you pick one that you really like, right? And you kind of go with that, but you might have a little different iteration depending on where you're using it, you know, have a little bit of a kind of iteration on that. So it doesn't have to always, you're kind of getting to the same thing by saying it that way, but then you could say it a little bit differently, but it means kind of the same thing. In Chinese, it would be same, but different, you know.
Can I show you guys one more thing? I don't know if I can. Is it possible to share my screen or not?
No, you can share your screen.
Maybe this will give us another perspective even, and for your viewers. But when you know your why, you see yourself in one dimension. You go from unaware to aware, from not knowing to knowing. But it's really only in one dimension. When you add your how, then you get to see yourself in 2 dimension, and it's better, more clear. But when you know your why, your how, and your what, we call that your YOS. You get to see yourself in 3 dimension. And that's when it becomes clear. And that's when you see the whole picture, right? So most people stop at why. What I talk about a lot at events is, you know, let's talk about why, but what if there was something much more powerful than why? Much more useful than why?
A title with that might be "Why Stop at Why?"
Yeah.
I was thinking about that.
See, oftentimes I'll use this one here. I'll say, you know, when you know your why, you're really only 1/3 of the way there.
Yeah.
So you're 1/3 of the way there, and it'll.
What?
So where's the other 2/3? You just saw the other 2/3. So
yeah, I love it.
That's.
Can I tell you why stop at why? And thank you for sharing that. I think the reason why that resonates so well is because it's so much more inclusive of the what and the how, right? Like, I love what if my why isn't my why, but that's only about the why. Why stop at why is inclusive of the why, the how, and the what.
It's asking what else is behind it, right? It's saying there's something more to this. And then it's another curious question, right? I like some of the questions we're coming up with because they breed some titles are very technical and very boring, and you're like, you know, and then there's other ones where you're like, ooh, I need to know the answer to that question. And so sometimes having sometimes it even being a question is a really good way to pick at somebody's brain. Because people can't help it. You know how there's that psychology of like, if you're talking to an audience and then you ask them a question, and it's why people overuse questions sometimes. But when well placed, when you're asking the audience a question, why it's really powerful is because the audience's brain can't help but to answer. In the same way, if you're driving by an accident, you can't help but to look. You know, it's like the same thing. Your brain answers it. So I really do like this, Gary, where we're going in the question route. Like, I'd really say that whatever it is that you land at, it would be a question.
Yeah. Why? I hear what you're saying, Mark, about why stop at why. Or one of the other things they talk about is, or what if the question was, what if there's actually something more powerful than why? It's a little long.
Yeah, there's another what, I know, and it is very long, but there's the double, the alliteration on the what and the why.
It's a little long, and I think the why stop at why captures
The same thing. Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Okay. I do like why stop at why.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What if my why isn't my why could be a section within the presentation?
That's true. Why stop at why though?
Figure out our why could be a question within the
we're like 6 levels down, you know, but I do like this, you know, from a perspective of thinking about a TED talk. I see that as being a very powerful title and could be a very powerful idea. This is kind of the lead into what your idea would be. Why stop at the why? And I could see you with your opening story of you know, figuring out that you really wanted to figure out what your why was, and then realizing that it took you a really long time and you went through a lot, and it really didn't make sense even when you found out what it was until you had the other pieces connected to it. And so until you got the how and until you got the what, you were not able, you know, the why didn't even mean anything. And so that could be a really good opening, and it really challenges people right out of the gate to think about that. Because even if they thought they could answer the why, and you could challenge that too in the beginning, you know, if we're talking about this as a talk, you could challenge that right out of the gate too and say, most people who can even tell you what their why is, it really isn't their why. It's probably a temporary motivation. I liked that. I like that you called that out as a temporary motivation.
Yeah, I met with the CEO of the people that were really all about the why, and she told me her why. And it was, I can't even repeat it, what it was, but it was very vague, and it sounded neat, and it was some really big words. But then I just said, so, well, what do you do with that? Well, that's my why. And it wasn't useful. It wasn't, can't do much with it. So you can't, you know, I don't know what it was just put on a website, but didn't really mean anything to anybody but her. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
That does make sense. And I just wanted to add this other thing too, because I'm thinking about all the different questions, and there's a philosophical part of this, and then there's an introspective part of this. And by that, what I mean is, why stop at why, to me, is very philosophical, right? And it's got me thinking about the world and why stop at why. And but I go back to what if my why isn't my why? And that's now hitting home, right? Yes. And maybe it's the use of the word my, but it becomes so introspective. And I think at the end of the day, that is what's going to draw people in the most, right? It's not only this bigger, larger than life question, but it's now, how does it affect me?
That's a great point, Mark. It does feel stronger. I mean, it feels like if I heard the two, I would be more drawn into the what if my why isn't my why? Because that's really what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
I can imagine most people are thinking that. Well, gosh, what if all of this I've put into all this isn't really my why? Then what did I just do with the last 30 years of my life?
Yeah.
Yeah. And listen, at the end of the day, I'm a big believer in we don't always have to pit one thing against another, one question versus another. I think this is a matter of just figuring out the order in which you ask the question, right? It reminds me of something I often teach when I'm talking to people about their resumes. And this one comparison I make is the order in which you put your bullet points of your resume is very similar to the lineup of the batters on a baseball team. And the research shows that the way you line up the batters on your team could be the difference between 5 or 10 runs. And then I say the way that you line up the bullet points in your resume could be the difference between 0, 5, or 10 calls for interviews. So for you, it's not even a matter of this question versus that question. It's a matter of how you line up the questions. And I think that goes back to Cathey's very brilliant point of you've got this whole wealth of questions now that you could ask even in a different order, depending on the audience that you're speaking to. Because I go back to why can't I figure out my why for a different audience? That might be the first question that brings them in. So I think it's a matter of order, not a matter of one versus the other. And I think you've got a plethora, that's one of my favorite words, Cathey. Plethora of questions.
I love it.
That means there's a lot. What do you help people with their resumes quite often?
Yes.
Oh, I'm about to rock your world.
Go for it. Rock it.
Imagine starting their resume with their why, how, and what. And then what you put below that is proof of what you just told them. So I should show you some before and afters of resumes that are, here's what I did, here's when I did it, what do you think of me? Versus here's why I do what I do, here's how I bring that to life, here's what people can count on from me, and here's proof of that.
Wow.
And so that resume will stand out, and I can tell you, it just rises to the top, and people get them right away. And then when the interview happens, they can answer every single question based on their why, how, and what.
I love that. I think you just re-rocked the resume. You might have even re-rocked the cover letter, which is a whole lost art and a whole nother conversation. Wow. I love the way that you just said that. We've got YOS for dating, YOS for hiring, YOS
for resumes, YOS.
We got to give that one to you, Mario. You got to take that and run, because I've done it with everyone from people right out of college to I just helped the commander of the Air Force Base here, Kirtland Air Force Base, get hired by what is the space, blue ocean or blue, whatever it is that does the space. And he brought over his resume, and it was just all the things he'd done, which was very impressive stuff. He's the head of Desert Storm and the head of all these amazing things. And then we rewrote it based on his why, how, and what. And man, it was killer. And he got the big job at, what's it called?
Deep Blue.
What is it? Blue something.
Yeah.
Anyways, now he's building rockets to go into space.
Awesome.
So it stands out when you use the sequence of why, how, and what. It connects to the limbic brain of the person that's reading it, which is the decision-making part of the brain. If all you do is have a list of what you've done, that connects to the neocortex, which they can understand it, but decision-making doesn't happen there. That's why you have to start with I believe. I believe goes right to the limbic brain, and then it allows them to raise their hand and say, yeah, you know what? I believe what this person believes right here. This is who I want to connect with. So it's limbic brain versus neocortex.
Yeah.
So we could talk about that at another time if you want.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother conversation.
You just took it to the next level, to the next audience. Dr. Gary Sanchez, absolutely amazing. You've got me thinking about so many different things right now. Not only what we've said, but how we can use it in our personal and professional lives, as husbands, as wives, as coaches, as speakers. Just curious, since we started this conversation 45, 60 minutes ago, what has changed or evolved for you, or what is something that has really stood out for you that you're now going to take away before you get to step onto that red circle for that upcoming TED Talk?
Super helpful, you guys. You've helped me get the right questions, because with a question, a talk is so much easier. Without the question, you've allowed me to get better into the mind or minds of the audience to succinctly understand their question, right? What if my why isn't my why? I hadn't thought of that. Why stop at why? Yeah, I had thought of that, but not in the way of why stop at why. Right? Why can't we figure out our why? Why do so many people not know their why? Those questions are, you two can probably quickly picture the talk.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It's already laid out right there.
Yes.
Because the answers to those I've got. The questions I didn't have.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah.
And once you get the sequence of questions, the talk, that's easy.
Yeah, for sure.
I could do it right this second. Now that I have those questions.
Ooh. Yeah.
Good. Wow.
So thank you guys for the help in fleshing it out, or whatever happened just now.
Whatever this was.
Yeah, whatever we just did. Thank you very much. We
just had an idea conversation. That's what just happened right here. And I am clear and confident that as people listen to this and people watch this, that they're going to want to learn more about you so that you can help them to figure out their why, their how, their what, how they didn't figure out their what they didn't figure out about their why they didn't figure out about their how and what sooner and faster. They're going to have a whole bunch of questions for you, Gary, and you are going to give them answers. So tell everybody who's watching right now, how can they find you? How can they find out more about you? And how can they figure out their YOS?
Well, instead of messing around with it, instead of spending more time trying to figure it out, just go figure it out. And it's on our website. All you got to do is go to whyinstitute.com, click on Discover My YOS. And since your audience now knows about why, how, and what, I would just go straight to the YOS. It costs $97. That's like nothing, right? $97 to know your YOS. So just do it, and then you'll have it, and then you can use it in your life to make better connections faster, to make better decisions faster, to move in the right direction with speed and with purpose. If you want to connect with me, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can connect with me on our website. There's a place for you to go to connect with me. If you host events and you'd like to have this for your audience, there's ways for you to connect. You'll see a speaker reel so you can see, what we speak on or what I speak on, and then I'd be happy to connect with you on that. I haven't done my TED Talk yet. I've tried. It's mind-boggling that I can't even get in with my own local TED group to do a talk. And it all came from right here in Albuquerque. And I can't even get on the stage there. It's mind-boggling to me.
Oh,
But
you
I
will,
didn't have
Gary.
it set up right.
I think you're heading the right direction now. I think you have a better shot now.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, for everybody who's watching, who wants to figure out why they should keep watching, well, there's conversations like this. If anybody wants to figure out how they can watch and how they can be a part of this idea conversation, hit Cathey and I up at It's About to Go Down Show, MarcCathey. Make sure you spell it right. Why? Because we like the way our names are spelled. And if you want to know what we're going to talk about, well, you just have to show up to the next episode of It's About to Go Down so you can listen to some amazing idea conversations like the one that we had with Dr. Gary Sanchez today. So until the next time, keep those ideas coming. We're here to have conversations about them. And until next time, remember, here, it's about to go down.